Welcome to another edition of EdTalks. This time we're going to talk about clinical trials. It's not an area that we spend a lot of time on. Super interesting to me as a former board member of Mary Crowley Cancer Research, where that's all we did is clinical trials. So important for the patient experience and family. And so we have a CEO of OpenClinica, David Kay, with us to share a little bit about clinical trials. David, welcome to EdTalks.
Ed, thank you. Thank you for having me.
So let's first talk about you a little bit. So tell us who David Kay is.
Yeah, so like you said, I'm the CEO of OpenClinica. I got my start in the industry through patient recruitment, and that's where I really, started to understand, really how broken a lot of clinical trial operations were. And, long story short, it brought me into OpenClinica through an acquisition that we made kind of in late 2024. And OpenClinica today, we build software and provide services that helps research teams run clinical trials, from finding patients, kind of to data lock and collecting all the data with respect to the clinical trial itself. And most people still think of us as an e-clinical software provider, and that is very much true. But today, just one piece of what we do and what modern research teams actually need. And we're actively working on a path to try to solve a lot of the big problems that we see in the clinical trial operation space.
Yeah, and a lot of people might not even know, why are clinical trials so important? Like, how is that sort of a foundation for a lot of the benefits that we receive today with modern medicine? Starts off with clinical trials. Can you share a little bit about that?
That's right. Clinical trials, they're the primary bottleneck in really drug discovery and getting drugs to market. The kind of stat that's floating out there is that, the extent and the velocity of, different companies and scientists discovering new drug candidates has really accelerated, especially, since the, growth of AI. But the number of actual drugs that hit the market has stayed capped at around 50 or so a year, and that's primarily due to clinical trials. And they're a huge operation to undertake. Most of the costs that's involved in pharmaceutical companies, and behind the actual development of a drug is with clinical trials. And it just takes a long time. It's very manual. There's a lot of different players involved in making it happen and come to fruition. And a lot of inefficiency, is it kind of starts and ends with some of the software and the disparity, or how disparate, some of these software systems are, and all the different players and kind of value chains that exist within that process.
Yeah.
And so, that's kind of why, OpenClinica exists, is to make that process a lot easier, more friendly to the researcher, so that they can really stick to, doing the science and worry less about the operations and logistics.
Yeah, I love that. And we'll put a lot of information and links to OpenClinica in the show notes so people can double down. But I'm going to give you a huge challenge, David. In 1 minute, take us through that from start to finish, the process. And, obviously OpenClinica is helping along the way to take care of this drug discovery, that time lag that we were talking about, not just the discovery, but the efficacy into practice. I'll try to see in a minute, because I think it's going to be really helpful to the audience, because this is going to be brand new for many people.
Yeah, for sure. So, for us, it starts with patients. And, what we provide is, a service to actually go find and enroll patients and participants into these clinical trials. That's something that, is a very difficult area to tackle. There's a lot of criteria that exist to be able to participate in the trial that's based on your medical history. And so, we go out and we advertise clinical trials on different media platforms online, and find, applicants who are qualified to apply and then ultimately enroll. And, once a patient is enrolled into the trial, that's when they actually start engaging with, potentially the OpenClinica software. And so as the trial is being run, the people running the trial are inputting the data behind the different visits, understanding some of the medical history, vitals, anything that's related to the trial itself into our software. And so one of the key value propositions that we're kind of bringing into the market is having those two things live under one roof. And so today, a lot of companies have one vendor for patient recruitment, one vendor for, enrollment and screening qualification. And what we're aiming to do is, put all of that together to eliminate some of the bottlenecks and some of the kind of disparity that exists between those software solutions.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great summary. So I'm going to give you a tougher summary. This one is a one word: So, David, you're a CEO, you've been a CEO. If you had to boil it down to one word, like what would be a key leadership skill that has enabled your success?
One word, I would say that word is patience. Clinical trials take a long time.
Yeah.
The industry moves somewhat slowly,
Yeah.
and being able to understand what drives people in these companies and what drives drug discovery requires patience. And there's a lot of compliance regulation behind the space as well. And so, unlike a startup and maybe the consumer side, it takes patience to make things happen.
That's a good word. Yeah. David, I thank you that you're there leading and trying to change things and make things better for our patients and our families.
Thanks so much, Ed. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.